Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about. Alaska Representative Maxine Dibert, welcome to An Honorable Profession. It is wonderful to be speaking to our first guest from Alaska.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This is an honor to be here, and I'm just so grateful to be here and learn here in D.C.
Yes, it's nice to see you in person. This is not a short trip for either of us to make, but especially for you. And I want to start by talking about a little bit about politics in Alaska and policy challenges of Alaska. I think that there are similarities across all 50 states, but my guess is Alaska is a little bit different. And so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Alaska is, proud to say, it's our largest state. So it has cities, it has villages, small communities, medium communities. I'm from the interior, so right in the middle of Alaska. And so there's a lot of needs on the coast, in rural villages, as well as our large cities.
By popular understanding, it's a red state, but I think it's much more nuanced than that. And so can you talk about sort of the political makeup and the dynamics of the state?
We have, since 2018, we have had a coalition in the House that includes independents, Republicans, and Democrats, and trying to problem solve all the issues. And that coalition continued in the 2020. And now I was elected in 2022, and now there's two coalitions. We have a coalition, kind of like a caucus of Democrats, independents, Republicans in the majority, and in my minority, we have the same makeup.
And I think that is incredibly unique. And if you could, just explain to our listeners a little bit about this caucus coalition system of government. Maybe it has some hope for the rest of the states that are mired in partisan politics.
Yeah, it's really exciting that Alaska is coming together to do this. And I'm just going to start with my experience being elected. We have ranked choice voting in Alaska too. And so when the top four candidates move ahead, and then you kind of recalculate until you get to your final two, and that kind of your opponent is kind of, you meet in the middle. And so with the election that happened in 2022 with ranked choice voting, many candidates were kind of in the middle, like trying to, do the best for their communities. And it's really exciting. And there were 17 freshmen in the House. And of those, we have a freshman caucus now. We have our two chairs. One is a Republican and one is a Democrat. And we try to come together to solve problems for all of Alaskans, but also our districts.
Can you tell me how ranked choice voting works as a candidate? I think we hear about it, and it's starting to have more conversation, at least in policy circles. Tell me about what that experience is like and what it's like as a voter.
Sure. Well, when I was campaigning in August, you have the open primary. That's in August, so you're campaigning all summer. And in my race, there were three candidates. and I was the only Democrat, and the other two were Republicans. And as I was door knocking and talking to folks in my district, I got asked a lot of questions. How does this ranked choice work? And I had to do a lot of education, which is, I learned pretty quickly what a representative does. You educate your constituents. And so I was learning along with them. And I'm like, you're going to rank all of the 3 candidates for this district, and we will go to a primary to see how we all did, and we're going to adjust our campaigning. Like as we're talking to folks in our district, we'll see where we land, what percentage, and then you kind of adjust and you head towards the long run for election night. But also we have early voting, and we also have mail-in voting. So there's a lot of education around, election in Alaska. Yeah.
Being an educator at the door shouldn't have been a big stretch for you as you're a career elementary school teacher. Can you talk a little bit about the transition from elementary school to the legislature and maybe who's better behaved at times?
Exactly. Yes. Well, first of all, I never thought that I would run for office. I love teaching. I love being with our youth, and what all teachers say, when you see a light bulb switch for a student, it's like the best thing. And I thought I was just going to retire in education. But there's a lot of needs in the state of Alaska when it comes to education. We haven't been funded the past 5 to 10 years now. And so colleagues started to ask me, like, hey, have you ever thought of running? And I said no a bunch of times. But then, I asked, actually, my daughter was in the legislature before she worked for a senator, and she was the first person I asked. And I said, hey, colleagues and friends are asking me to run for office down in Juneau, down at the Capitol.
So we've had New Deal leaders who have been preceded in politics by grandparents or parents. I don't know that we've had somebody whose child, preceded them in politics.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how your daughter influenced your decision to run?
Absolutely. That's really funny, that my daughter beat me to the legislature. Yeah, she told us a couple of years ago that she was going to go work for a senator in the legislature, and it knocked our socks off as parents. We were so proud of her, to move to Juneau, the capital, and we didn't really know what she was going to go do, but she was a staffer, and it's such a foreign place when, the legislature is so far away. A lot of people don't know what it really means. So when I was starting to get asked to run for office, and by my friends and colleagues, I didn't know. I said no a bunch of times, but I didn't know what to do, and so I turned to my daughter. When she had just returned from working down in the Capitol, and I said, hey, my colleagues and friends are asking me to run for office. You were just there. What do you think? And she was like, without a beat, just said, heck yeah, you need to get down there. You know your community. You know Alaska's needs. You're the best person for this job. And I was like, all right. I turned to my husband. I said, I guess I'm going to run for office. And that's kind of how it all started. And she's been super supportive. She's like, the first thing you need to do is do a outfit change, get out of the teacher's clothes into campaign clothes.
So for more than 20 years, you were an elementary school teacher, and there's a rhythm to that, right? Like you start at each academic year, and you go through the year, and then you have a summer, and then you go back. I imagine jumping into politics changes all of that. Can you talk a little bit about how you made that transition and what it was like, the good and the bad?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know how often this happens when a teacher is teaching and then closes their classroom and moves on to the legislature. It's because my students were like my family. We spent every day together. I spent probably more time at school than I did at home. So family is like really important. And I knew I had to get to Juneau and do this job and figure out how to get there. And I've always loved people. And to be honest, like I loved door knocking. Like I loved getting to know my community, like looking them in the eye, shaking their hand. I love that piece of it. And I knocked over like 3,000 doors in my district. And I love that part of it. So I knew I wanted to bring that to the legislature, is getting to know my colleagues and like, this is my new family. We're going to spend a lot of time together. And that was like my number one goal, is like right away start to build that family sense. And luckily, when I got to Juneau, there were 17 freshmen along with myself elected out of 40. And we kind of leaned on each other, and we actually formed a freshman caucus. And we met every week. On Wednesdays, we had Welcome Wednesdays with prior legislators who taught us how to read Mason's Manual, to read the rules book, how to work the floor, how to do a bill. And so we reflected that in freshman caucus. And our freshman caucus had lunch every week, and we wrote 3 pieces of legislation together. We're working on a 4th. A lot of laughs, a lot of like, oh my gosh, I feel so dumb, because it's so much, and leaning on each other. And in the interim, we've been meeting every other week, and we've been having guest speakers helping us understand our state's budget, understanding our oil and gas infrastructure. And just yesterday, I had to log on to a meeting where we had an AI presenter to come talk to us, like what we can do as a freshman caucus to come up with legislation. So I have my new family, which is the freshman caucus, and of course my minority caucus is a great group of people too to lean on. One story sticks out. I knocked on a door, and sometimes I would get this, you knock on a door and they're like, oh no, I'm not into politics. I don't care. I don't vote ever. And I just said, hey, just give me 30 seconds. Let me at least tell you who I am. I'm a teacher. I taught at the school a couple blocks down the way. And this mom, she opened up the door and she's like, oh, okay, you're a teacher? And I'm like, yeah, I taught at this school. And she's like, my son went there. And I was like, oh. I'm like, who's your son? And we found out that I taught her son. And I was like, yeah, so that's my number one priority is education, like to make it better for our students and a better learning places for our students. And she's like, well, maybe, can you help lower class sizes? And I said, absolutely. That's like my number one priority. And she's like, that's what I need. My son has over 30 students in his middle school classroom. He's getting lost, and it's getting harder for me to keep him in school. And that would be really great if you can do that. And then I was like, great. And she's like, I've never voted, so how do I do this? I don't have the card. I don't know where to go. So I had my little, my election stuff. I'm like, here's your place where you go vote. Here's the day. And please go vote. Vote for me if you believe in, education and that priority, you should do it. And she said she would. And she took a sign.
That's amazing.
So I think being a teacher is like, I'm from the community and for the community.
I think that's right. And, as we all know, teachers see so much more than just the educational life of a child. You see all the needs and the opportunities that families have, and being able to take those relationships into policy, translate them in policy, is an enormous benefit.
I am the only Alaska Native woman in the legislature, and it's, when you look on like my half of the chamber, to see like I'm like the only one with black hair, brown skin, brown eyes. I just such a contrast compared to my colleagues, and my grandparents. I'm Koyukon Athabaskan, so it's really amazing to me that my grandparents, who were just two generations before me, spoke fluent Koyukon, and to be in the legislature 2 generations, my grandparents would be very proud of me if they saw where I was, and probably scared. But so like that experience of living in rural Alaska at their village in the summertime, and living in a city in the during the school year, really helped me. And hearing 2 languages has totally helped me in the legislature. And I've co-sponsored some Alaska Native language bills, trying to get Alaska Native languages in schools again, and because Alaska Native languages are dying, so that's another priority of mine. And this session I learned that there's only 150 fluent speakers of my language. Wow. So it's really important for me, for my voice to be there in the legislature.
Yeah, and do you feel like that voice is welcomed as to inform policy, or do you face real challenges in moving that legislation forward?
That's a great question. I would say it's half and half. I mean, I guess in the legislature, we have tribal affairs, and that's a new committee. So, and I'm on that committee. And it's really nice that that's in the legislature, because you can bring up tribal issues more easily than, I don't even know how they did it before there was a tribal affairs committee, but I'm really glad it's there, where we could talk about Native language and get bills through Native culture and values, and subsistence, and we're having really big impacts on our subsistence food. Like the families along the villages that I grew up in haven't been able to catch fish for 5 or 6 years. So it's really detrimental in our rural villages not having food. So we have this avenue through the Tribal Affairs Committee, and those bills get to the floor. And it's really great to have that voice and that opportunity. And I'm on a large minority. We're 16 strong, and we support each other. And to have 16 voices be able to speak up on issues like this is really, really something that's been amazing to me. I'm glad you're there, and I'm glad thank you.
You're able to bring those issues to the forefront. You've talked about the challenge to fishing and subsistence. Mm-hmm. Alaska's a place that's seeing the impacts of climate change. You have glaciers that are melting. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as the future impacts of climate change, and what you can do to make your state more resilient?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, Alaska is a cold place. And being born and raised there, I've seen so many changes just in my lifetime. I grew up eating my native foods, like salmon, and I never thought that, I would ever see salmon be depleted. It's my mom says, well, at least we have the memory. And I was like, oh man, that's so harsh. And so, adjusting to that. And I know that Alaska Native tribes are helping one another. We're working with Congress, and I know Congresswoman Mary Peltola is working really hard on overfishing of our salmon, and that could be a start. But we also have in the capital, the Juneau, a piece of the glacier fell off this summer, and it caused a huge wave to crash into homes, and homes fell in this river, and we just had built low affordable housing, and those got hit. So those are things that we never thought that we would witness. And then also the permafrost is melting. So, and when you build roads over permafrost, I don't know if you've been to Alaska, when permafrost melts, the roads are like a roller coaster. And
I thought it was bad when people complain to me about potholes. I can't imagine roads after permafrost.
So, we're dealing with all of these issues of roads, food security, and, snow and ice melting. So
it's terrifying, right? Like when you think about sea level rise, you think about sort of mass sea level rise, but when you have glaciers melting next door, it's that tidal rise is immediate and destructive.
Yeah.
Wow. So what do you see coming up in Alaska in politics in the legislature that you think the rest of the country should be paying attention to?
Well, I can't believe I already have to talk about campaigning again. I did throw my name in the hat, so that it's a weird experience to get through your first session, then talk about campaigning and think about all of that hard work repeating again. So that's on the back of my head, back of the my thoughts.
Yeah.
And also like this session coming up, I have a couple of pieces of legislation that I have to learn how to do hearings on and get testimony, and I'm looking forward to that part of being a legislator. And I guess the things that people need to know about Alaska is that maybe watch like how ranked choice voting, how we're adjusting and learning from it, and how it's helping not only Democratic candidates, but it's also helping Republican candidates get elected. That's what I find really interesting. Definitely climate, that's a huge, because it's affecting us at a faster rate, and how we're addressing that. And I know that another bipartisan issue that we're really trying to work on is childcare and the crisis around childcare and workforce development. Democrats and Republicans and independents are really trying to come together to solve that problem in our state. So that's exciting. And childcare is really interesting because we have a lot of small communities and they don't have childcare. So people can't work, and it's so different in all districts across Alaska. That's why we're coming together on childcare.
That's great that there's a bipartisan effort on that issue. Often it feels like there's not, and so hopefully that's a model for the rest of us.
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to wrap up with, I think probably most of our listeners haven't been to Alaska, is my guess. Can you just describe to folks what you love about the place you live and what people should know about Alaska that they probably misunderstand or just don't even think to ask?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Come to Alaska. It is beautiful. If you love mountains, the vastness of so much land, being able to see animals, and it's a land of big contrasts. So like where I'm from, it could get down to like 40 below in the winter, and it gets very cold, and our students, when they go out to recess, to 20 below.
Oh my God,
which is
that's so crazy. My kids complain when it's like 60 degrees.
So yeah, recess at 20 below. But in the wintertime, like right now, around January, the sun will rise around 10 a.m. and set around 2 p.m. But we have these beautiful shoulders of sunrise and sunsets. It's not like the sun sets and it's done. And then at night, in the wintertime, we have the northern lights that light up the sky, and they dance like green, purples, and yellows. And then in the summertime, the sun doesn't set. So if you come in the summertime, you're going to have to wear sunglasses 24/7. That's why we have amazing gardens in Alaska. We've got like 100-pound cabbages. And so it's just an extreme place to live. It's beautiful and wild, and everyone should come to Alaska.
I should say I went to Alaska for the first time this summer and was blown away by the vastness, and then also the whales right next to you. There's bears. There's everything is it's ingrained into your everyday life in a way that it's inconceivable, I think, for most people to understand. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being a New Deal leader and representing your state in New Deal for the rest of us. And I think there are exciting things to learn on electoral reform and other things from Alaska that may be an approach that could help what ails so much of the country. So thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.